Hello and welcome to Raise the Vibe with Liz. I'm your host, Liz Peterson, and today I'm going to be discussing Spirit Embraced with author Kim Colella. For those of you who aren't familiar with Kim, Kim is a spirit doula. Her purpose is to be an evocator of the sacred and to help others celebrate its magnificence in themselves, their relationships, and their world. Her book, Spirit Embraced, highlights the journey that unfolds as she allows her spirit to lead, as she releases the painful memories of her past, follows her deepest dreams, and creates a life that is in alignment with her spirit. Kim shares the transformational tools that illuminate her path and invites her readers to utilize them in their pursuit of a life authentic and free. Kim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Liz. It's so wonderful to be here with you.
Great. So I hope I said I was practicing before we started. Kim Colella.
Kim
As you
Colella.
said, like say it
Lots of L's.
out. Colella. Welcome to
Yes.
that. Kim, I've really been enjoying your book. I
Thank
love the
you.
topic. Of course, all my listeners know I am just a spirit embraced geek. So, loving the content in the book. I love your stories. I really want to dive in. And I love that you have practices after each chapter. And I want us to be able to bring those to our audience. So, listeners, be prepared. Lots of tips and tools during this interview. And I want to jump right into Kim,
Okay.
what was it that really brought you to writing this book? What in you wanted to bring all of this information and your experience to the world?
Well, first of all, I didn't. Matter of fact, when my son was a junior in high school, we started touring colleges, and I started asking myself, what am I going to do with the energy that opens up when I'm not no longer full-time mom? I only have the one child. Um, and what I heard back was right. And my response was no. And the voice was persistent and consistent. Every time I asked, the voice came back right. And finally, one day in frustration, I said, what am I supposed to write about? And what I heard back was, tell the stories that long to be told. And that shifted everything. I was like, oh, I can do that. And so then I negotiated with Spirit, as I often do. And it was around March. And I said, could I please have until October? I want to be able to spend this summer. It was March of my son's senior year when I said yes. I said, I want this summer to enjoy him because he was going to the Midwest for school. And then I'd like a month to settle myself in the new configuration, and then I'll be willing to start the beginning of October. And then I have a cousin who lives in New Mexico, who at that point would send me a Christmas card every year, occasionally write me an email. And out of the blue, she sent me an email, not knowing I had this purpose of writing, that I'd made this commitment, and said, Kim, I'm going to be going to Minnesota for my mom's 100th birthday at the beginning of October. And my home and car will be just empty here if you'd like to come down and use them. And I said, absolutely. And when my husband said, I get to go too, right? I said, no, you don't. This is time for me to be with my spirit and write. And I wrote the first section of the book in that week. It just flowed out. And so all of those things, right? As my experience is, when we listen and we say yes to spirit, everything we need beyond our imagining will be provided. So when my cousin Robin offered me her place, I just knew, oh, I'm really supposed to write this book. And originally I wrote it for my son, and I have a daughter of the heart in Lesotho, Africa. I wrote it for her, and she quickly became my muse because she would call and say, Mom, when are you going to be done with that book? We need that book in Lesotho. Mom, the women here need your book. And she just kept pushing me. And I wrote
That.
it for my son, believing maybe in 20 years he'll wonder, who was my mom beyond mom? And this would be a guidebook for him too. And then as I continued to write, I knew I was called to bring it into the world and not just have it be for them.
It's definitely a calling too, and it's something that we have to embrace as people who, we're not raised as thinking we're writers or authors, and then we're presented with this task by spirit to step into a role that, we're not familiar with. And kudos for answering the call. It's a beautiful piece of work. And I want to dip into that, that inner voice or that idea that you received. Can you discuss it, like how it came in and how you learned over your life to follow this voice?
Well, I made a commitment to the voice when I was around 8 to 10 years old. I grew up in a house that had a lot of chaos. My mom was a single mom of 8 children. My father was living on the streets in late stage alcoholism. There was a lot going on. And after one particularly uh, stressful day at home, I woke up in the middle of the night and I felt this force of love around and through me. And I knew in that moment that I could create a different kind of life.
Mm.
And I said yes to it. And I made a commitment to love.
Right.
So that has then led me, right? I would say one experience that really amplified that I could trust this voice. There's been many, but one that stands out is when I turned 30. I'd always wanted to meet Mother Teresa and I wanted to see her work in Calcutta. And when I turned 30, I learned there was a L'Arche community in Calcutta that was built on her property. And I was a part of the L'Arche community here, which is a community of people with developmental disabilities and those who choose to live with them as family. So when I heard that their house in Calcutta was built on Mother Teresa's property, I said, I need to go. It was clear the time is now. You must go now. So I set a goal to pay off all my bills, to get money in the bank to cover my flight by August 31st. And on August 30th, I had less than $200 in the bank. I needed $1,400. I did have all my bills paid off, but I needed $1,400 to buy a ticket.
Mm.
And as I was driving home, I thought, I'm not meant to go. I only have $200.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard, just wait. And the next day, my business partner went to her P.O. box and there was a check for $500 for me. I went to my P.O. box. There was a check for me. A person came in and bought 10 gift certificates from me, which had never happened before and it has never happened since.
Wow.
And at the end of the day, I had less than 82 cents. I had everything but 82 cents.
Mm-hmm.
And I had $1 in my pocket and I took it out and I slammed it on the desk and I was jumping up and down saying, I'm going. And my associate said, you're going where? I'm going to Calcutta to meet Mother Teresa. And I just knew. And then when I got to Calcutta, I enrolled in I got a room at the YWCA. And as I was leaving, then after resting, this man behind the desk said, where are you going? And I said, I'm going to look for a community called L'Arche. And he said, oh, I know L'Arche, which was 13 people made up the L'Arche community at
Wow.
that time in this city of 13 million people, and he gave me directions. It took me 2 hours to get there. And when I got there, they had never received any of the letters I wrote asking if I could come. But the director took me into his office and we talked for about an hour. And then he said, well, Kim, we usually don't allow anybody into the community for less than 3 months because it takes that long to acclimate.
Mm.
I only had 6 to 8 weeks left of my time. And he looked at me and he said, but we've been praying for 2 weeks that God would send us someone. And I guess you're that someone. We are so short staffed. Could you come and live with us and not just work with us? So I moved in the next day. And, then I got to meet Mother Teresa many times. And that was a dream come true and so profound for me. And then when I came home, my friend who had taken over my practice, it had gone down to two regular clients in the 3 months I was gone,
Mm.
two regular clients. And within a week of being home, somebody had told the newspaper about me in Little Gig Harbor, Washington. And the Gateway newspaper came and interviewed me about my trip and did a full page article with a huge picture of me. And within the next week, my books were full.
Wow.
So every part of that, right,
Hmm.
just was this lesson of I can surrender to this voice, because if this voice really is the voice of spirit, everything I need will be provided in the most unexpected ways, not ways that I could control, right?
Right.
And I find that voice to be a voice that often asks me to do something preposterous, like traveling to Calcutta by myself with nobody expecting me there,
And
right?
it's amazing how everything was put in place for you, even though they hadn't received the letters. And there's other bits of that story that I loved within your book that also point to, but you were provided for in the moment. And I think when we surrender to spirit, that we are in this co-creation, this collaborative experience on this planet, we can just surrender and it shows up in ways that are just beautiful and unexpected, like you said, Kim, because
Yeah.
it's, we can picture it one way, but it shows up differently. It's just,
And I feel like the more we just kind of surrender with a childlike wonder about it,
mhm.
not with anxiety of, well, how is this going to happen? How is this going to happen? But how is this going to happen? Right. And, I feel like I kind of play hide and seek with it. Like, are you around this corner? And that it's more of a playfulness. And when we can bring that sense of play to working in communion with spirit,
Mhm.
that things show up in just the most wonderful ways.
Nice. Do you bring that playfulness into your negotiations like you were speaking to? Because you do speak in your book how, you sit down and you listen.
Mhm. I use a lot of imagination, um, and a lot of play. And somebody else might call my what I call imagination, because I really do feel like the voices of those I invite in are there. I'm not clairvoyant. I don't see, I hear, and I feel. And I
Mhm.
just trust that. And I write what I hear. So, for instance, I write one of the exercises in the book is creating a soul council. And the first time I sat down to create my soul council, I intuitively put out 7 chairs. Um, and then I sat down to see who showed up. And Jesus showed up. I have a Catholic background. I was born and raised Catholic and have 20 some years of Catholic schooling. So those are the images that often show up for me. So Jesus showed up, Mary Magdalene showed up, Aletheia, speaker of truth, showed up, Sigmet, the Egyptian god, showed
Mhm.
up, um, Princess Diana showed up. And I was like, Princess
I love
Diana.
that.
Like, and I talked to each one. And when I got to Princess Diana, I was like, why are you here? I really respect you and I like you, but I don't have any deep connection to you. Why have you come? And she said, I'm here to remind you of your softness.
Mm.
And I just loved that, right? To to come towards these things with a sense of softness rather than pushing through, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, and then whenever I call my soul council, I always keep my journal there, and then I'll ask a question, and Mother Teresa showed up in my soul council. Um, so I ask the question, and then I hear their voices, which are very different from each other. the way they say things to me. And then sometimes I use it. I recently wanted to take, last spring, I wanted to take a course with Jean Houston, who's one of my favorite mentors. And her courses are quite expensive and in our family budget, but I love to get to go when I can. And she was offering this class. And for past students, she was giving a very nice discount. And so I sat with it for 24 hours before I said to my husband, Jean's having this class. I really want to go. And he was like, well, do you think it's going to help your growth and healing? And I said, when has she ever not? And he said, then I think you should go. And I waited another 24 hours because I was concerned about the output of funds. And then I sat with my soul council. And the first three who answered were so emphatic that I must take the class that I finally just said, okay, is there anybody who's a naysayer here that I should not do this? Please let me know. Okay, who's all yes? And it was like a party in the room, right? It was like, yes, you must take this class. And so I did, right? So it's just a way for me to break through my resistance too, to have this counsel to guide me and support me. I think it's important that we have it on this plane, but that we have it on the outer plane as well.
Mm-hmm. And when you say outer plane, what do you mean? And I also want you to give a little clue as, for those listeners who are like, well, how do I do this? How do I sit and get quiet and listen? A tip for them.
So I guess I feel like on this earth plane would probably be a better way to say it,
Okay.
that I have a support system of people who I've consciously surrounded myself my whole time I've lived here since I was 24. I've surrounded myself with people who had the qualities of who I wanted to become.
Mm-hmm.
So before I became a mother, I surrounded myself with people who were amazing parents, men and women. And I studied them like kind of like an archaeologist and was like, oh no, that is radical for me. Like how they're dealing with this conflict with their child, or how they're taking their child and going and meeting the child's needs in the middle of this big party. Like it was all so foreign to me, right? So I've always surrounded myself here on the physical plane with people who can be supports just by being who they are in the world.
Nice.
And then supporting myself. I don't know. I said outer plane, but I think it's inner, you
There's
know,
that.
on the spiritual realm. I'll say it that way, right? With the angels, guides, ancestors, um, and then holy ones. I just recently have lost two people who I consider mentors. One of them today will be the first kind of celebration of her life. I was filled with such grief when she died. And then I realized within a couple days, oh, she can be part of my eternal grid. And asked her, would you join me? Would you join my soul council and be part of supporting me and calling me forward? Because she's always called me forward on this plane. And I just, okay, well, she's passed. That doesn't mean our relationship has to end. And so, how do I continue to work and love her and feel her love for me in this new configuration? Right.
Wow. And first, I want to say I'm sorry for your loss. And for
Thank
those
you.
who have also experienced recent loss or loss in the past, what advice do you have being a death doula to assist people in maintaining that connection across the veil?
Well, first, to just do what I did and ask. But also, um, I work with some of my clients now of helping them to connect with their ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and to be guided by them and to create a relationship with their ancestors who have passed, so that as they prepare for their own transition, that relationship is already strengthened and they know they're going from love to love. So it makes the dying process less terrifying. Um,
Mm.
and it also, then, the more we do that, the quicker we think about it when a beloved has died, right? To be able to
Mhm.
say, I want to still be in relationship with you. Please be part. So I will, when I'm doing a healing or sitting with a client, I will call in the ancestors on my mother's side and the ancestors on my father's side, and then the ancestors on their mother's side and the ancestors on their father's side. And I ask them to guide me, to guide my words, to guide the healing, to show me what needs to be done and how I can be of service.
Mm.
So it's just like any relationship, right? That the more that we nurture it and engage with it, the
Mhm.
stronger it becomes. That it might not feel as strong the first couple times, but you just stay at it.
I agree. I was working with a client just the other day and mentioned, the more that we engage with spirit, the more open we become and the more accessible we are to spirit. When working with
Yes.
spirit, I too light a candle before a call or light a candle before working remotely or in person and set up my altar or pull cards. When I'm getting ready to do a session in person, I'm calling in my healing team and their healing team to be present for the healing. I think it's so important, to be working with spirit on the other side and to know that we're not just here alone on this physical plane, having to do it all on our own. We do have this spirit help. Yes, we have to have
Yes.
boundaries with spirit sometimes, but we do have, that assistance all the time at our fingertips.
Yeah. And one of the guidelines I use for myself
Mm-hmm.
is, are my relationships on the earth plane and spirit plane, are they expansive? Are they expanding me or are they constricting me?
I love that.
Because for me, love always calls me to expand, to be more inclusive, right? To go beyond the boundaries of my familiar. It doesn't suck the life out of my soul, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I gauge my relationships. And some relationships, we have them for a certain time and then things shift and it doesn't bring the same uplift. And for me, that just means we had a bond of growth and that's been completed.
Right.
Right. And so to lovingly just not engage as often in that, because I'm looking, for me, in the short time I have on this planet, I want to grow and expand. I don't want to contract and be smaller than.
Right. And when we're in relationship, we want to be in relationship where we're lifting up the people that we love and the people that we love are lifting us up as well.
Yeah. When my husband and I got married, we made a commitment till death do us part. But before we made that publicly, we talked about what that meant for us. And we were both very clear that our first commitment was to our spirit. And if our soul, our spirit started to die in the relationship,
Mm-hmm.
that would be a death that would cause us to part. And the really beautiful thing about that is because we made that level of commitment. When one of us wants to do something, and it's most often me, that's quite preposterous. um, he's right on board because he can see how it's lighting up my spirit and that it's beyond me, right?
Right.
That something beyond me is calling me to that. And I do the same for him. And because of that, then the intimacy and the connection has continued to grow over almost 29 years of being married.
That is beautiful. And I think that's, you know, something that we can take forward because we're trying to create sacred relationship right now in
Yes.
community. We're kind of done with the old ways of being. And that level of communication and love and support is what we're all desiring in community and in relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing
Thank you.
that. Yeah. And I'm going to stay on it because you do discuss relationship in your book as well and getting clarity around relationship. So before, you know, you receive this beautiful gift of relationship, what did you have to do to manifest that, which you also talk about in the book, into your life?
So I had to let go of my what I called my harem of possibilities. So all the people that, men who I had these ties to, but not, they were kind of my just in case, you know, like I knew I wasn't meant, it didn't feel like I was meant to marry them, but just in case, because I knew I wanted to get married and I wanted to have children. Um, so I purposefully cut those ties, cleaned up our friendship so
Mhm.
that there wasn't any romantic undertones of, well, maybe someday, right? Um, and then I sat down and I wrote the qualities of the person I wanted to spend my life with.
Mm.
And they weren't really physical attributes, right? They were a person with a deep spirituality, with character, who was loyal, who was faithful, who was creative, who was musical. I did put that in there. I wanted somebody who played an instrument, just who and what it was when I first met my husband. It was at a dance for the L'Arche community in Seattle, Washington. Um, and he walked in and I saw him through two doorways, and it was towards the end of the night. And I thought, that man looks interesting, a bit scruffy, but interesting. And then I watched him come in and start dancing right away. And the way he interacted with the folks who had disabilities, developmental disabilities, some with Down syndrome, different things, and the way he treated everybody else were in alignment. And there was so much joy in him. And he would look each person so intently in the eye with this face full of joy of, like his spirit was just lighting up to be able to be with them. And I turned to a friend and said, I want to date with that man by the end of the night. And after that date we had, I went home and I wrote, are you who I think you are? And it was all the qualities I had asked for in a human being to be my partner. And he was, and it took some time for him to realize he was. But I knew right away, right, that it was a little overwhelming for him, I think. Um, yeah,
But you sat down and you wrote this list. You were clear and you were clear
I
with
was
spirit. This
clear.
is what I want. I did the same thing.
Did
And
you?
yeah, beautiful sacred relationship. And I think if we take the time and we clear out the past, which you talk about in the book, we cut the cords, we really get clarity on what we want in our life, we're able to bring this in because we're
Right.
having that focus.
Right. And the steps for transformational healing are to
Mhm.
identify what needs to be healed, to express it, to release it, to replace it, and then to tend. And often people get stuck in the expressing it,
Mhm.
right? They've identified the problem and they want to talk about what it is, and they
Yeah.
want to talk about what it is, and they want to talk, but they don't do the next step of a release. And then, even those who release, if they haven't identified what they want to replace it with, then that cycle kind of just continues to circle around to identify, express, release, and they don't get to the next place. So it's
Right.
really important, right? That we both of us wrote down what we wanted, and that was the replacement, right? The image in our mind. My husband, the men I had the longest relationships with previous to my husband, and there were quite a few because I was 33 when I met him. Um, my mother adored all of those men because they were comfortable. They were from that same system. And people were a little uncomfortable with my husband at first. My family has grown to really love him, but when they came to our wedding, I talk about how courageous it was for them because it was almost like going to a different country. Like the rules and how the people I've surrounded myself with, they're so different, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it took a lot of courage and a lot of love for my family to come and to celebrate with us. And
That's wonderful. And it's great that you pointed out it's not what they or you were used to. It's something different. And it is like if we see like, oh, this feels like home, maybe this isn't what you desire to have in your life because you're attracting the old and the familiar instead of attracting what you desire, which you're unfamiliar with having in your life, which I think is
it's
a
like,
very important little piece there.
yeah, it's like they're like an old pair of slippers, right? Doesn't have
Mhm.
any support. They don't look very good anymore, but we know those slippers, right? And I would say to Nico in the first years of our marriage, it was very difficult for me. I'd never lived with a married couple consistently. My dad was only in our home for the first 6 years of my life, but he was in and out. So I didn't have this, and he was in late stage alcoholism. So I didn't have that vision, right? I I didn't know what it was like to walk into a house and have someone light up because I was home. And it terrified me. And because my husband is such a safe person, all the things I thought I had healed, a new level of them rose because now I had a safe container in which to face them.
Mhm. And when you
But
have
then,
that safety, you're able to heal those wounds that you weren't aware of before because they didn't ever present themselves.
and it was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I talk about it as another Calcutta experience.
Hmm.
Everything was foreign about being married to this man. Everything was different. Everything. And I used to get so frustrated and I'd say, if we had 5 children and you left me, I know how to do that. I do not know how to do this. And it took patience. It took patience for myself. It took him having patience. He was so, so patient and forgiving. and and I had to be patient with the cellular shifting that was happening.
Hmm.
Every cell of my being had to shift to this new reality of receiving love.
Right.
And I think the most courageous thing for most of us is to learn how to receive love, real love,
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
not the illusion, not the connection,
Hmm.
right? Connection doesn't mean love,
No.
right? So learning how to receive love was a big deal.
Yeah, there's definitely a difference in wanting a partner, so you have, someone to spend some time with as opposed to having relationship. I think there's a difference between relationship and having a companion.
Yeah, and for me the difference is about knowing and being known,
Hmm.
to really be seen in who you are, not any projections that we might want to put out into the world, but to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to be seen, to see another, to see the other, and continue to say yes.
Yes, and when you have that and you have the safety underneath, because I think that that's the most important part right there, is you can have a level of communication that goes beyond anything that you've ever imagined in your entire life.
Mhm.
And it's a loving and respectful and curious and supportive.
Yeah, it is all those things. We're, yeah. We're
Yeah.
also very playful and at times snarky with each other, but in a playful way that
Uh-huh.
breaks tension or whatever. Yeah. That's
Yes, and
another,
that's fun too. Go ahead.
yeah. It reminds me of our talk about death. And I've noticed that when somebody dies, their beloveds take on a piece of them often. So when my mother in law died, my sister in law started growing her nails out. She never had long nails, but her mom always had beautiful nails that were, you know, um, long and colored and beautiful. So Cheryl, after her mom died, had had long fingernails till she died. Well, she died in 2020, and she was very snarky with my husband. She was his older sister, and I am so snarky with him since she died. And he'll say, "Okay, Cheryl," and then he'll start giggling, and he's like, "You sounded just like her." Just like her, right? And I think sometimes she just comes through.
Yeah, it really
But
feels like she's with you and you're almost channeling that snarkiness. Like she's
yeah,
playful and around and her energy is around and possibly you're picking up on that. That's fun.
yeah, like we have a family rule that when my son was growing up, we didn't use the word whatever, but she would always say that, whatever, Nico. And so, every once in a while, I'm just like, whatever, Nico. And he just cracks up. And so, this whole spiritual journey, and it's very remarkable and playful. And it's also very hard. And I think the more we expect it to be, have hard times, not that it's always going to be hard, but we're here to grow and expand.
Hmm.
And that is rarely done in a tra la la experience. I think sometimes we think if we're doing it right, it's just going to be roses and tulips and it's not. We're David Spangler, who's another one of my favorite mentors, said just a few years into my marriage, which was such a gift when he said it, because I was thinking, what have I done? Like, this is so hard. Did I make a mistake? And in class one day, he said, somebody asked him about soulmates. And David's response was, well, if there is such thing as a soulmate, they will take us to our very edges.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, well, that's what Nico's doing. He's just the right person, right? It's not going to be easy because they're going to take us to our edges and show us where we need to grow,
Hmm.
which is much different than being in a relationship that's soul sucking or abusive or any of that, where it's
Yeah.
just painful with nothing coming from the pain except more pain. This is pain of growth pains, right?
Hmm. Yeah, healing that third chakra work, that inner
Yeah.
family systems and beliefs about ourselves and others. And it's expansion. And it's exactly what you said. It's not that painful experience of disrespect and abuse and just constant pushing and draining and, life
Right.
sucking. It's the complete opposite. They're pushing your edges and making, it's this vulnerability that sets in, but it's like looking at, oh my gosh, here's this belief system that I've been functioning with. And, with, the love that we have together, we can like grow out of those old belief systems that we held on to. So we can more fully step into the love. Because I think all of the healing of the third chakra work and sacred relationship is getting to more love. And to get to
Yes.
more love, we have to get out of fear. And to get out of fear, we have to get rid of those old belief systems, that are guarding our hearts.
Yeah. And our capacity to receive it and to give it,
Yeah.
right? That's growing and expanding, growing and expanding.
Mhm.
I, I've, before I was a mother, until I was pregnant, actually, in the middle of my pregnancy, I stopped. But previous to that, I was volunteering at the women's prison here. And I met two young women there that have become beacons for me in my desire to grow in my ability to love and receive love. The first one was a young woman. I met her on Christmas. No, it was before Christmas. I met her, and she realized that my husband was Nico, and she knew my husband because he had been a jail chaplain. So when she was in jail, he had been her chaplain, and she was so thrilled. And we became friends. And then on Christmas Eve, when I was talking with her, she asked me what I was doing for Christmas. And I felt so constricted to share, because how do I share this amazing day I'm having and gonna have when she's in prison, right? So I tempered things down. And then I said, well, what about you? Will you get to see any of your family? And this young woman, I felt like she could have been one of my classmates in college, right? Like she just was so full of life and beauty and, I don't know, charisma, whatever. So I said, what about you? What will you do? And she said, well, I'm hoping to see my daughter. And I said, oh, you have a daughter? Yeah. How old is she? Oh, she's 5. I said, well, how long have you been in here? Oh, I've been in here for 3 years. How much longer do you have? Oh, I'm in here for life with no chance of parole. And my heart dropped all the way down through the floor. I just couldn't imagine that. And I was just kind of, it was like I just got slapped or something, right? In shock of what she had said. And then she said, but Kim, now my goal is to learn how to be here and to be the best person I can be in here, and to grow with this as my home for the rest of my life.
Wow.
And I was so struck by that. Here she is in prison, trying to figure out how to be free within the confines
Mm-hmm.
of the prison. And then I would help with a group after their services. And there was a young woman who was in the group. And one day she came and she was shaking almost. You could just see the anxiety on her face. And she shared that she was getting out. And she'd lived her whole life in the system. And she was terrified because she didn't know how to live out in the world. She knew the rules in
Mm-hmm.
prison, and she didn't want to fail and come back.
Wow.
And they've been a guide for me, because that's this whole thing of growth, right? I could have gone back and had comfortable relationships
Mm-hmm.
and hoped that one day I'd get out of it, but really stuck in the comfort of it.
Yeah.
Or I could figure out how to be free and how to grow in freedom, how to grow in my ability to love and be authentic and to serve in the world. And I'm just always so grateful that they witnessed how they were imprisoned, whether they were in prison. I mean, the one who was in prison was less imprisoned than the one who was getting out.
Right.
So I still walk with them 26 years later and thank them for that witness and for calling me forth to go beyond those edges and to learn how to live in a totally different world.
Wow. Amazing. We never know in life where our teachers are going to be.
Right.
It sounds like we were talking before, and I was sharing my experience that I shared on social media the other day about how I woke up in the middle of the night, and
Mm-hmm.
you're a death doula and said this beautiful thing is having death as a companion, before we started the recording, and how that's impacted your life. And when I woke up in the middle of the night, I felt death. I had a sense of death was coming. I knew when. And it at first, sent me into a little fear and panic, but then I started looking at death and assessing death, especially after losing my mom a couple years ago, and the afterlife and the relationship that I have with the afterlife, and then what would that look like for me? And then the next morning, going, feeling life is short. And then I went into the beauty of life, not only the beauty of my life and how beautiful it's been, but the beauty of nature and the way that life works and the magic that I see in life. And I was just in tears all day. I had a life review that went back to my birth and forward again. And then just this feeling of it's really not that oneness experience that I had, or that time is an illusion experience I had, or that joy of my life experience that I had where I was just in tears. It was finding the joy in my life through death and being in tears. And we were speaking that in the beginning. And I want you to talk about how you have looked at life that way as well and had death as a companion. Can you speak to that a little bit, Kim?
Absolutely. So my father died when I was the day after my 15th birthday, very unexpectedly. I didn't have the chance to say goodbye. He had a massive heart attack in his car and was gone. I got pulled out of a test, a midterm test in my high school, to be told my dad had died. And then a year and a half later, my mother had a massive stroke. I
Mhm.
was the seventh of the eight children. Um, so I was towards the end with a 24-year spread between the youngest and the oldest. My mother had a massive stroke, and they told us she wouldn't survive another one, and she probably wouldn't live 5 years. So with that, I those two experiences just taught me that life is brief. Everything can change in a moment. And it didn't stop me from doing things. Like I went and studied in Madrid my junior year of college. And I remember thinking, Mom could be gone before I get back. How do I say goodbye in a way that I feel complete? Then I went to Calcutta, for went to India and Nepal for 3 months. And, again, Mom could be gone. She ended up living 30 years, but I lived my whole life from the time I was 16 on as if she was going to die any day. So, what I see that as such a gift in my life, because my husband or my son or my beloveds, I have to look at them to say goodbye. I can't be like, okay, yeah, bye. I have to be like, okay, have a good day. Share your light. Love you so much. I have to do that because I feel incomplete if I don't. But
Mhm.
it also, I was speaking to you earlier that my son's 26, and I said to my husband about a month ago, I was just pregnant. It has been a blink, and our son is turning 26. How did that happen? And if I get to live another 26 years, it's going to go by equally or quicker,
Mhm.
equally faster, quicker. And I'll be 90 if I'm lucky to get another 26 years. I'm hoping I get another 30 at least. But knowing that I'm going to die and accepting that as a reality
Mhm.
makes me want to enjoy this life and savor it. Savor this incredible Pacific Northwest day we're having today,
Yes.
getting outside and playing in it, checking in on my loved ones. I always have a legacy piece I'm doing. So the writing the book was a legacy piece.
Mhm.
Then after that was over, a few months later, I got the next legacy piece, which was to have the party that I had dreamt of for 28 years, for at that point 25 when I got the message, for the 90 people who put on our wedding for us, our friends and our family, who cooked and cleaned and decorated and made my dress and my veil and my husband's vest. and um, I put on a reception for 400 people, did all the music, dance music, everything. And I wanted to have a dinner for them because it was a 90-degree day. And we had pasta, and I had 3 friends who were in the basement of this hall that only had one small air conditioner, and it wasn't downstairs. It was
Mm.
90 degrees, and they're boiling pasta, and they
Wow.
were sweating, right? And so I wanted to just like give back to these people. So we just had that last July, and it was beyond my dream to have this dinner that was catered, and nobody had to do anything except show up.
That's
And it
beautiful.
was so fun, right? And then when that was done, about a month later, I said, now what? What's my next one? And I heard, not yet. You need to savor the party.
Mm.
To savor the party. Don't rush to the next. And then it was in the fall in a class with Jean where she had us do some writing. And in my writing with my soul council, what I was told is that I was called to be a soul scribe for my tribe. And I said, okay, I have no idea what that means, but I'm in. And then a month later, they gave me the first part of that,
Wow.
which is transcribing a journal to my son that I've written since I was pregnant with him as a gift to him.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
That's beautiful.
it is so beautiful. And I read these stories I wrote about him to him. And he's just such a character. And I belly laugh by myself in this room as I'm typing it out, and I'm belly laughing and I'm crying. And it's just been such a gift to my spirit to do that. So, and I have enough things that I would like to have done before I die,
Mhm.
that if I live 30 years, I'll scratch the surface, but it helps to keep me focused. Like, if the question I ask myself often is, if I died tonight, if I died today, what would I regret that I had not done? Okay,
Mhm.
let's start doing that.
Yeah.
What's the plan? What's the top, what's the one that rises to the top as the most important right now? And then let's do that. And sometimes they're playful, like throwing a party, and sometimes they're like writing a book and being like, oh, um, and sometimes they're really tender, like doing these journals.
Mm. They are, aren't they? I had that
Yeah.
experience. My life shifted in a big way about 6+ years ago, and then the passing of my mother, and then this experience I had this weekend. Really feel like it was a spiritual experience about experiencing my own death and feeling that. And I had started 6 years ago to like, I am going to live my life to the fullest, full out, full love, everything. But this experience this weekend just solidified that. It's like, there's all of these things that I want to do. And I know I can't complete all of them in this lifetime, and I'll have another. But to wake up every day and just appreciate the beauty that we have here in the Pacific Northwest, these beautiful sunny days, like you were saying, my children who are growing up to be beautiful men, and my
Mhm.
passion and purpose work that I get to do, and what a gift that is for me and my soul. It's just living from what is my day going to look like today? What is it, like you said, that I would regret on my deathbed? Like, I have been asking myself that
Yeah.
these past years. And it's really taken me to valuing my life and having this deep appreciation for my life and the joy that I have in my life, and want to bring more joy into my life, and the time that I get with the people that I love and that I have attachments to, and to enjoy those beautiful, loving attachments that I have in my life.
Yeah. And I have all those things like you, I want to savor. And then I want to do things that will make it easier on my husband and son when I pass.
Yes.
So my husband and I right now are on a 5-year plan of really trimming down our belongings so that when we're gone and our son inherits it all, he doesn't have to. He'll
That's it.
still have to get rid of stuff, right? Because he'll probably have his home by then and things, but he will know that we have trimmed down the fat, and the stuff that we still have left is either something we needed or something we loved.
Oh, that's so up in the cosmos right now, too. And I
Is
say
it?
cosmos, but I think it's in the collective. Choose a
Yeah.
better word. It is really in the collective to like clear the clutter, to move everything that we don't really need out, to like minimize our living. Like, what is really important to us? I've done
Yes.
it over the last 6 years. I have friends that are doing it. It's really up, like, move it away. There's very little that we actually need.
Yeah.
It's
We're
so true
using
to
a
clear for our loved ones. Is
yeah,
that it?
we're using a book as a guide called The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning.
Oh,
Yeah, and it's all about taking care of your stuff so somebody else doesn't have to.
I love that. I think that's important.
Yeah. Why would my son want these files from a job I had 4 jobs ago, right? Why would he care about that? Let's
Right.
get rid of it.
And
I don't need them anymore.
and it removes the question, what to do with this? Would mom or dad like this? What would they like done with this? It removes all of the
Yes.
questions and everything's in order. And I think that that's love.
I think it's one of the strongest acts of love we can do. So in 2004, with a friend of mine, we wrote a manual called Lasting Gifts, Living with Intention, Dying in Peace. And it has 9 sections to fill out from your final celebration, right? Do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be terramated? Do you want to be aquamated? Do you want a mushroom suit? There's so many options now. We're rewriting those parts right now because in 10 years, the alternative um, options for us, we updated in 2014, and now we need to update again because so much has changed, right?
Hmm.
So we're in the middle of that process right now, but that's the only section my mom filled out. And the year we did the book, 2004, the original, I gave a copy to each of my 7 siblings who looked at me like I had 5 heads. And then a year later, my mom died. And the only section she had filled out was her celebration. And I had taken her funeral shopping and we had so much fun and we chose her casket and we did all this stuff. Um, and then went out to lunch and giggled all the way. Um, but after her funeral, about a month later, one of my sisters called and said, "We get it now. Mom's funeral was so beautiful because it was her. She chose what had meaning for her, and then that was the message for us,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? The music she chose was her message to us. And so now we're filling out our books.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So every 5 years, my husband and I have a little coffee date somewhere or tea date, and we update our book and talk about it. And those have been some of the most intimate times because what he chooses that he wants included,
Hmm.
readings or music, many of them I've never heard before. And what he wants his final message to be, which is embodied in his final celebration, is very different than mine. Right. And so, what a gift that we're doing that for the other and for those we love. Because I don't know about other people, but I've been at memorial services where I've been like, who's this person they're talking about? I never heard them listen to this kind of music or talk in this way. Right.
Hmm.
And I think it helps in the grieving process to have the spirit of the one we're celebrating having been an intimate part of that celebration.
Yes. Mm. Lovely. Can you say the name of that book again for people who are listening to this and thinking, oh, that's something that I would want to implement in my life? And then
It's
share your book and how they
okay.
can find Spirit Embraced.
So, Lasting Gifts is the name of the book, Living with Intention, Dying in Peace. Um, it's not on Amazon, it's at some small bookstores, but people can purchase it through my website, which is spiritdoula.com. Doula is doula.com. And my memoir, I call it a guiding memoir because every chapter ends with a tool of transformation that I gleaned over the last 40 years from people who I consider to be masters in the field of psychology, spirituality, quantum physics. Angeles Arian, things I learned from her are in there, and she was a cultural anthropologist. So just these nuggets that are just so beautiful and have been so impactful, helping me to make those shifts in my life. So every chapter has that. The book has 4 sections. They kind of follow what I talked about before about transformational healing. The first section is called Release. The second section is Listen and has exercises to learn about
Mhm.
listening. The first section is the hardest because it talks about the things I had to release. And some people find that a hard chapter to read, painful.
Mhm.
The second one is about my time going to Calcutta and meeting Mother Teresa. The third section is about manifesting. And for me, manifesting is about listening to the deep whispers of our spirit, saying yes and following them, of what our true heart's desire is. Um, and that talks about me going to see the Oprah show um, after suffering 3 really big deaths and
Mhm.
needing to do something fun for my spirit and going with my best friend from college. And just how that yes to my spirit leads to getting interviewed by Oprah for a minute and a half, to meeting a woman in the airport who takes women to South Africa to immerse them in the AIDS pandemic, which led me to go there. And then that led me to being on a board for the Tacoma Lesotho connection. And then a young woman was coming from Lesotho and they needed a host family, and we were the host family. And that was in 2010. She came. I went to the Oprah show in 2003. 2010, Mary came and lived with us and has been my daughter of the heart ever since. And we still are in communication. She named her first child after her brother, my son
Oh,
Sam. We went to visit her in 2015, and to honor me, the day we bought our airplane tickets, her and her husband tried to conceive. And so when we got there, they were 4 months pregnant. To honor me by
wow.
being pregnant in my honor,
Wow.
that was really hard to digest, right? Like, and now they just had
Beautiful.
their third Malachi. So that one yes led to so much more that I didn't even know I was calling to myself, right?
And there's
So
so many beautiful stories in the book and so many
yeah,
exercises at the ends of the chapters and so many beautiful things to implement in our lives. And not only can they get it through your website, please say that
they
again,
can
but
get it
also on
on
Amazon.
Amazon. They can get it at their local bookstores. They will order it through Ingram Sparks and they have it. So they can order it there. They can order it just about anywhere. Yeah.
Yes. And
The ebook right now you can only get on Amazon.
mhm.
Um, that will be changing, but for right now, it's just on Amazon.
And then you have a free gift. So share the free gift that
Oh,
you're going to be offering our listeners. And then if you could share a jewel of wisdom before you go.
okay. So the free gift, if you go to my website, and we will put the website address
Yes, all the links will be in the show
attached
notes.
in the show notes. And it's, spiritdoula.com/book uh, hyphen promo or something. I'll put it in there. Then that will take you um, to a guided meditation that I've done on amplifying our field. So I do
Great. Thank you
this.
so much for that gift.
Yeah, that this is an exercise I use before I'm doing a talk, before I have a hard discussion to have with someone, to I use it always when I need to be my most amplified self and bring my light to a situation. So
Love it.
that will be there. And then my nugget of wisdom is that you were made for this time. It is no mistake that you're on the planet at this time and in this place. And the greatest gift you can give to the world and to whatever you call that force, the great I am, is to let your light shine as brightly as you can. And you have so much support if you just ask.
Mm, I love
The
that.
support is there.
Thank you, Kim. That was beautiful. And thank you for such a lovely conversation. It's been a pleasure to host you today.
Oh, it's been so fun, Liz. Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Look up Kim and find her and buy her book, Spirit Embraced. It's a beautiful story. I'm really enjoying it. And you can find me at raisethevibewithliz.com and on social media everywhere at Raise the Vibe with Liz. And remember to get out there and raise the vibe. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us and have a
Thank
great
you.
day. Take care. Thanks, Kim. Bye now.